Jimmy Butler just left no doubt that he will never play for the Miami Heat again. New details have emerged to make it clear that what is next for Butler's basketball career lies outside of Miami. Shams for ESPN has reported a bunch of stuff, but primarily in a face-to-face meeting, Jimmy Butler told Pat Riley he will not play basketball for the Miami Heat ever again. There's been a little bit of a chance for reconciliation, at least that's what's been reported, that the Heat haven't been super aggressive in trying to trade Butler. There aren't a ton of great options for him out there, and that ultimately they may just bring him back to the team after his suspension, have him play the year out, and if he leaves in the offseason, so be it. The Heat get a bunch of cap space, they get more flexibility. At that point, it would be more worth it to them to let him just walk rather than what they're getting in some very limited trade packages. But it has been made clear that not only will Butler not be returning to the team, not be playing for Miami again this season, but also if he has to, if they can't find a trade for him, he doesn't like his options in free agency, he will opt into his player option in the offseason and still be a member of the Heat next season, or at least in the offseason, in an effort to get him to the destination that he wants to go to. That player option is a piece that everybody was a little bit confused about what role that would play in this entire situation. Would he actually opt into it? Would he risk the Heat actually keeping him on the team or suspending him or him losing money, whatever the case may be? He made it clear in the face-to-face meeting he will take the player option if it means that he can go elsewhere, get traded to a preferred destination, and continue to use that as leverage over Miami. Because one of the things that we've talked about in the past is that letting Jimmy Butler walk, if he declines the player option, signs in free agency elsewhere, wasn't necessarily a bad option for Miami, depending on what the trade offers were. If all the trade offers involved taking on Bradley Beal's long-term money, Michael Porter Jr.'s long-term money, some other trades as well, then it might make more sense for them if they're not getting that much other compensation in terms of assets, draft picks, young players, to just let Butler walk and just get the cap space flexibility. He has made it clear that his preference and what he will do is that he will opt into that so that they don't get that cap space flexibility. And this has all been layered with some comments from Butler's teammates where they're talking about how nice it is to have clarity and be away from the distraction of the situation. And it's clear that even if Pat Riley wants to try and strong arm Jimmy Butler into playing for the Heat this year because he's under contract, he doesn't like the trades, it's not benefiting the team for Jimmy Butler to be around. I can't imagine a scenario in which we get past the trade deadline, Jimmy Butler hasn't been traded, and then they also ask him to return to the team and play. It really feels like Jimmy Butler has played his last game, his last minutes for the Miami Heat. And although it might seem crazy that we've gotten to this point, there's very clear reasons why that have been reported. This situation deteriorated to the point that it has. Apparently, Butler has been upset for a little while that the Heat have not been adding pieces to the team to try and compete. He's seen other teams, specifically Boston, around the Eastern Conference, continue to add talent, continue to spend money. And the Heat, although they've been trying to add, Damian Lillard, they were in some like Giannis rumors for years, Bradley Beal stuff, a bunch of different things, trying to add pieces. They've never been able to actually make that move. They've never been aggressive enough to actually bring in the kind of pieces that other teams in the East have. And that appears to be the breaking point for Jimmy Butler, in addition to some of the comments made by Pat Riley and just a deterioration in his relationship with the team itself. Whereas the Heat have talked about some of their grievances where Jimmy Butler's been taking flights separate from the team, private flights, including back when they made the finals against Denver. That's pretty much been debunked though, because Jimmy Butler was dealing with some family stuff and that's why he was flying separately from the team. So I quite frankly, other than lack of availability and just being upset with Butler because of how he's handled the situation, I don't really know why the Heat would have so many issues with Butler. I understand that he's probably not the best teammate of all time, probably not the easiest guy to deal with. We've seen over the years him and Eric Spoelstra even have issues on the bench, but ultimately he's been productive. He's helped you in the postseason. So this is clearly just Butler saying, I want out. You guys haven't done enough to help me. All these other stars are getting help. I want to go somewhere else. In this entire situation, all of this is obviously a tactic for Butler to try and get somewhere. It seems like Phoenix is the preference. There's some other teams that are potentially options as well. And if this was a couple of years ago, this would be much easier to work out. If this was the old CBA, there's a lot of options out there for Jimmy Butler where you don't have to deal with the second apron, you don't have to deal with some of these restrictions, and teams are more willing to give someone like Butler a long-term contract. When you think about a couple of years ago, the Wizards were totally okay giving Bradley Beal a bunch of money. Michael Porter Jr. got this massive contract in Denver. Teams were way more willing to spend a couple of years ago. Whereas now with the second apron, we're not seeing as many trades like what this Butler one could have looked like. We're not seeing big extensions for players that are 35 25 years old that you're not really sure what their future is going to be, because nobody wants to be basically ironically, what the Phoenix Suns are right now, where they have this team that looks like it was built for 2016 with 3 stars and a bunch of minimum guys. It's become clear that that's not how you build a team. And if this was 2015, 2016, I'd imagine this situation would have already been resolved. But the new trade landscape in the NBA makes trading Jimmy Butler, finding a place for Jimmy Butler where the Heat can actually get value out of him, very, very difficult. And this is an extremely difficult situation for Miami to deal with, because it's gotten to the point where it's not just that Jimmy Butler would prefer to leave. It's not just that their team isn't really going anywhere, that they're kind of stuck in the middle, mediocre, that maybe it's time for them to just move on. It's gotten to the point where they have to move the guy or pay him to not play. If they can't find a deal that they like, they're just going to tell him to go away for the rest of the season and not be around the team. The teammates have made it clear that they're better off without him there. You can't then, as an organization, make the situation worse by forcing Jimmy Butler to be there. They already tried that once. He came back for 2 games after reconditioning, being away from the team, and then got suspended because he was so lackadaisical in his performance in those 2 games. Jimmy Butler's made it clear what it will look like if he's on the Miami Heat the rest of the season. He's made it clear he doesn't want to be there. Told Pat Riley that face to face. This situation is over. He is not going to be a member of the Heat. He's either going to get traded this offseason, he's going to get traded before the deadline, or he's going to use all of this leverage and try and force his way out and then not be able to, and then hit free agency in 2026. As crazy as that sounds, Jimmy Butler seems to be so stubborn about this and so adamant about leaving Miami that he would be willing to just not play. That's what he's told Miami. Now, ultimately, I would be very, very shocked if he doesn't get traded before the deadline, or at least in the offseason, because to then play a whole nother year, not play, I should say, a whole nother year, to opt into the deal and then just not have a team would be crazy to me. I don't know what the salary cap ramifications would be. I don't know what the financial situation would be for Jimmy Butler. Like, would he actually still get paid because he's just like refusing to play for the team despite opting into the contract? There's a lot of stuff there. And at the end of the day, this just comes down to Miami's willingness to deal with the craziness that Jimmy Butler is putting on their franchise. And it comes down to what offers they get, what teams are willing to step up, maybe offer a little bit more. How realistic is it for them to actually find a team for Bradley Beal to go to? Are the Suns even an option? Because clearly that's Butler's preference. Does a team like Golden State step up and decide that they're willing to do it? Denver's playing better, so it seems like they're kind of out of the running. And if it's not Phoenix, and we've already talked a bunch about Phoenix and the Bradley Beal contract and how he has to opt out of the no trade clause, if it's not them, things get really, really difficult. And I could foresee a scenario where Jimmy Butler gets to the offseason, opts in, does exactly what he told Pat Riley he would do, and then all of a sudden the Heat are arguably in a worse situation then than they are now, because now you could trade Jimmy Butler tomorrow. You still have 3 weeks left to trade him, and then everything's fine. You get some value and you move on. If it's in the offseason, now he's taking over control of like 2 entire seasons of your franchise, and that's just the situation that they found themselves in. And ultimately, if I was in charge of Miami and I don't know what trade offers they're getting, I would actively explore and be aggressive in trading away Jimmy Butler. I want this guy away from my team. I want to get something out of him, and I want to move on from this entire thing, because it's not like Miami's 10 games under 500. Like, they're going to be a competitive playoff team, and depending on what they get in exchange, it could set them up well for the future. Tyler Hero's having the best season of his career. You still have Bam. You've got Jaime Jaquez. You've got a bunch of guys there that you could build a future around, and it's clear that that future no longer involves Jimmy Butler, so let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's go ahead and get him moved. It's easy to say when I don't know what the offers are, and I've already talked about how difficult it would be to actually find a team for him, but I can't imagine there's any other resolution to this situation than Jimmy Butler ending up on a different team.